Chapter 1. Origin and Formation of the Parthian Empire. The Parthian Empire was founded in the 3rd century BC by Arsaces I, the leader of a nomadic tribe in northeastern Iran. Initially a modest region, the empire expanded rapidly, becoming a major force in the Middle East. The chapters of this empire were written by the rulers of the Arsacid dynasty. The Parthian Empire originated in the kingdom of Parthava, a region located in present-day eastern Iran, known for its nomadic tribes and the strong influence of Persian culture. Arsaces I, the leader of the Parthian tribe, managed to unite the various nomadic groups into a single political entity, transforming this small kingdom into an empire that would last for more than 4 centuries. A crucial factor in the formation of this empire was its strategic position, located at the intersection of trade routes between the East and the West. By controlling these routes, the Parthians accumulated considerable wealth, which allowed them to build a powerful army and resist external attacks. The nomadic tribes that formed the core of the Parthian population were known for their exceptional skills in cavalry, which gave them a strategic advantage over their opponents. Arsaces I took over around 247 BC, taking advantage of the weakening of the Seleucid Empire, which dominated the region at the time. The Seleucids, successors of Alexander the Great, were facing internal revolts and difficulties in maintaining control over their extensive territories. Arsaces launched a series of military campaigns and succeeded in conquering significant territories, laying the foundation of an empire that would rival the greatest powers of the ancient world. Another defining aspect of the Parthian Empire was the adoption and adaptation of ancient Persian traditions. The Parthians adopted many cultural and administrative elements from the Achaemenid Empire, such as the organization of satrapies, provinces, and the use of Persian as the official language. This cultural continuity was essential in legitimizing the new dynasty and consolidating power. Another factor that contributed to the Parthian success was their ability to employ an effective military strategy adapted to the terrain and local conditions. The Parthian army was composed of light and heavy horsemen, known as cataphracts, who were armed with long spears and protected by full armor. They used tactics of harassment and strategic retreat to disorganize enemy lines, a method that would be used with great success at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. The formation of the Parthian Empire was a complex process, marked by numerous challenges. Arsaces I had to deal not only with external threats, but also with rivalries, internal conflicts between the tribes that formed the core of the population. To consolidate his power, Arsaces implemented a series of political and military reforms. One of the most important reforms was the creation of a loyal aristocratic elite, which had key roles in a decentralized feudal structure. This aristocracy was responsible for administering the satrapies and providing troops in case of war. Another notable aspect of the formation of the empire was Arsaces' diplomatic acumen. Instead of engaging in constant conflict with all neighboring powers, Arsaces chose to establish strategic alliances and negotiate treaties that would ensure his peace on multiple fronts. For example, the Parthians established prosperous trade relations with the tribes of Central Asia and used the region's natural resources to finance the expansion of the empire. Arsaces also encouraged the development of infrastructure in the territories he controlled, building roads and bridges that facilitated trade and transportation. These infrastructure projects not only improved the lives of the inhabitants' empire, but also consolidated the Parthian position as an economic and military force in the region. Throughout the reign of Arsaces I and his successors, the Parthian Empire continued to expand, conquering new territories and consolidating its position against rivals such as the Seleucid Empire and later the Roman Empire. This expansion was made possible by a combination of military skill, diplomatic policies, and effective administration, which transformed the Parthian Empire into a dominant force in the Middle East. Chapter 2. Administrative Organization. The Parthian Empire was characterized by a decentralized administrative structure, adapted to the ethnic and geographical diversity of its vast territory. The administrative system was feudal, based on the loyalty of a powerful local aristocracy and a network of regional governors called satraps. The satrapies, the main administrative units of the empire, had a high degree of autonomy. Each satrapy was ruled by a satrap, who usually came from the local aristocracy or was appointed by the Arsacid monarchy. These satraps were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and defending their territory. In return, the satraps were required to provide military and financial support to the supreme king, especially during external conflicts. Although the empire had a main capital at Ctesiphon, where the royal court was located, the central authority was relatively weak compared to the powers granted to local governors. This decentralization was both a strength and a weakness. The vulnerability.The allowed the regions to be administered efficiently, taking into account local particularities, but also created the risk of political fragmentation. In addition to the satraps, the Parthian aristocracy, formed by powerful noble families, had a significant role in the administration of the empire. They owned large landholdings and led their own military garrisons, being essential in maintaining regional stability. The loyalty of these elites to the Arsacid dynasty was ensured through political and matrimonial alliances. The economy of the empire was based on a well-established fiscal system. Taxes were collected locally and transmitted to the imperial center, but a considerable part remained at the disposal of the satrapies to cover regional expenses. Trade routes, including the Silk Road, generated substantial income, and taxes imposed on merchants contributed to financing the administrative and military apparatus. Maintain the connection between the various regions of the empire. The Parthians developed an efficient network of roads and courier systems. These roads were essential for the transmission of royal orders, and for the supreme king played a central role in maintaining the balance between the autonomous satraps and the noble families. Through diplomatic tactics, but also through demonstrations of force when necessary, the king managed to preserve the unity of the empire. For example, internal conflicts between satraps or between various noble factions were often mediated by the king, who intervened to prevent territorial fragmentation. The decentralized structure was an advantage in managing the diversity of the empire, but it also had its weaknesses. In times of crisis, such as external invasions or contested successions, the satraps and local aristocracy tended to act independently, weakening the overall cohesion of the empire. The administrative organization of the Parthian Empire was thus a combination of Persian traditions and adaptations to the political realities of the era, contributing to its longevity as one of the most influential powers of antiquity. In their early days, the Parthians faced the Seleucid Empire, a power Hellenistic empire that dominated vast territories in the Near East and Central Asia, inherited from Alexander the Great. Relations between the two empires were marked by armed conflicts and political rivalry, but also by mutual cultural influence. After the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, his vast empire was divided among his generals, forming powerful Hellenistic kingdoms, of which the Seleucid Empire was one of the largest. Controlling territories from Asia Minor to India, the Seleucids had considerable influence over the regions where the Parthians had their roots. As the Arsacid dynasty began to consolidate its power in northeastern Iran, conflicts with the Seleucids became inevitable. This was due to the Parthian strategic positioning on major trade routes, as well as their expansionist aspirations, which conflicted with the Seleucids' territorial claims. The first Arsacid rulers, Arsaces I and his successors, took advantage of the internal weaknesses of the Seleucid Empire, which was embroiled in conflicts on several fronts, including with the Hellenistic kingdoms to the west. During this period, the Seleucids could no longer maintain effective control over the eastern provinces, which allowed the Parthians to progressively declare their independence. A turning point was the confrontation between the Parthians and the Seleucid king Antiochus III, 223 to 187 BC. Although Antiochus managed to temporarily regain control of some eastern territories, this success was short-lived, and the weakening of the Seleucids after their defeat in the Syrian war against Rome gave the Parthians the opportunity to expand. The peak of the confrontations occurred during the reign of the Parthian king Mithridates I, 171 to 138 BC, who initiated a major offensive against the Seleucids. Taking advantage of the internal unrest in the Seleucid Empire and the lack of a strong leader, Mithridates conquered the territories of Media, Elam, and Babylon, expanding his borders westward. One of the most important victories was the capture of the city of Seleucia on the Tigris, an important economic and cultural center of the Seleucids. This success marked the beginning of Parthian domination in Mesopotamia and seriously undermined Seleucid influence in the region. Although the Parthians defeated the Seleucid Empire militarily and politically, Hellenistic influence continued to be strong. The Parthian elites adopted a number of elements of Greek culture, such as architecture, art, and urban organization. The Arsacid monarchs began to issue coins inscribed in Greek, and some of them adopted Hellenistic titles such as Phil Helena, lover of the Greeks, indicating a respect for the cultural heritage of the Seleucids. The Hellenistic cities taken over by the Parthians, such as Seleucia and Susa, became centers of cultural interaction, where Greek traditions combined with Iranian ones, giving rise to a unique synthesis. Over time, as the Seleucid Empire lost its power to the Parthians and other rivals, including Rome, relations between the two entities became less relevant. The Seleucids remained a marginal power until they were completely eliminated by neighboring kingdoms. The Parthians, on the other hand, consolidated their position as the dominant force in the east, replacing the Seleucids as the main power in Mesopotamia and Iran. The Parthian victory over the Seleucids was not only a military milestone, but also a reaffirmation of Iranian identity in the face of Hellenism. However, their relations cannot be viewed exclusively through the lens of conflict, because the cultural and economic exchanges between the two civilizations left a profound legacy in the political and cultural structure of the Parthian Empire. The consolidation of Parthian power following the confrontations with the Seleucids provided them with a solid basis for further expansion, preparing them for the new challenges coming from the Roman Empire, which was to become their greatest rival in the following centuries. Chapter 3. Confrontation with Rome. In ancient times, the relationship between the Parthian Empire and Rome was defined by political rivalry, military conflicts, and repeated attempts to expand into each other's territories. This competition led to numerous confrontations, but one of the most emblematic was the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, an event that highlighted the superiority of Parthian military tactics over Roman infantry in certain contexts. The rivalry between Parthia and Rome arose in the wake of Roman expansion in the east. After the fall of the Seleucid Empire, Rome and the Parthians disputed control of Mesopotamia, Armenia, and neighboring regions, areas that were strategically important from a commercial and military point of view. Marcus Licinius Crassus, a member of the first Roman triumvirate alongside Julius Caesar and Pompey, wanted to gain further glory and wealth through a campaign against the Parthians. Confident in the superiority of the army in 53 BC, Crassus organized an expedition into Mesopotamia without taking into account the geographical and tactical peculiarities of the region. In 53 BC, the Roman army, consisting of approximately 40,000 soldiers, mostly heavy infantry, entered Parthian territory. The Parthian forces, led by the general Serena, were much smaller, numbering only 10,000 men, mostly heavy cavalry, cataphracts, and light cavalry archers. The Parthians used extremely effective tactics, adapted to the terrain and the weaknesses of the Roman army. Cavalry mobility. The Parthian light cavalry of archers harassed the Roman legions using the strategy of shooting in retreat, known as the Parthian maneuver. These mounted archers were able to shoot arrows with great accuracy while retreating, maintaining their distance from the Roman infantry. Cataphracts, heavy cavalry, consisting of armed soldiers equipped with full metal armor, launched decisive attacks against Roman lines, crushing units that attempted to maintain formation. The Romans found it impossible to counter the Parthian mobility and close in on their cavalry for a direct confrontation. Crassus was lured into a strategic trap, and his army was overwhelmed by the Parthians' continuous attacks. The battle ended in a devastating defeat for Rome. Some 20,000 Roman soldiers were killed, 10,000 were captured, including their battle standards, a symbol of Roman prestige. Crassus himself was killed, with legend having it that the Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth, as a symbol of his greed. The Battle of Carrhae was a defining moment in relations between Rome and the Parthians. It demonstrated that Rome, although a global power, was not invincible, especially against innovative war tactics. The Parthian tactical superiority highlighted the central role of cavalry in the wars in the east. The Parthians they showed that a smaller, but well-organized and terrain-adapted force could defeat a larger, more rigid army, such as the Roman one. The defeat marked the limit of Roman expansion in the east for a time, and Mesopotamia remained under Parthian control. The loss of the banners was also considered a major humiliation for Rome, which fueled a desire for revenge in the following generations. The victory at Carrhae solidified the Parthian reputation as a formidable opponent, capable of withstanding a power like Rome in the eyes of the ancient world. This confrontation positioned the Parthians as a great power, comparable in influence and prestige to Rome. Although the battle was an important victory for the Parthians, their relations with Rome continued to be marked by periodic conflicts. Wars for control of Armenia, a buffer kingdom between the two empires, were frequent. Despite the military rivalry, there were also moments of negotiations and diplomatic exchanges between the two powers. However, the Battle of Carrhae remained a lesson for Rome, influencing its subsequent strategies in the eastern campaigns. The Battle of Carrhae was more than a simple military confrontation. It was a demonstration of the fundamental differences between the two empires in terms of military culture, organization, and strategy. While Rome relied on the discipline and strength of its heavy infantry, the Parthians showed that speed, mobility, and adaptability could change the course of a conflict, even against a numerically superior power. This battle remained a symbol of the Parthian resistance in the face of the greatest power of the West. The military system of the Parthian Empire was one of the fundamental pillars of its power and longevity. Although the Parthian army was not of impressive size compared to other contemporary empires, such as the Roman one, it was distinguished by its mobility, discipline, and efficiency. Its main strength lay in its elite cavalry, the cataphracts, which were an example of impressive feat of military innovation and adaptation. The Parthian army was organized in a decentralized manner, reflecting the feudal structure of the empire. Local regions and satrapies provided contingents of soldiers, most of whom were cavalry. This decentralization allowed for rapid mobilization, but made it difficult to maintain a large standing military force. The cataphracts were the symbol of Parthian military power. These knights were fully equipped with metal armor, which covered both the soldiers and their horses. The armor, usually consisting of hinged plates, offered excellent protection against swords and arrows, making them almost impenetrable in battle. The cataphract's main weapon was the long spear, used in direct attacks against enemy infantry and cavalry. They also carried swords and daggers as secondary weapons. Their main role was to crush enemy formations and destroy the opponent's morale through massive frontal attacks. Another essential component of the Parthian army was the light cavalry, composed of highly mobile mounted archers. They used short bows, but very powerful, capable of penetrating enemy armor. Their strategy involved continuous harassment of the enemy through rapid attacks and strategic retreats, known as the Parthian maneuver. These maneuvers allowed them to maintain a safe distance from their opponents and inflict significant losses. Infantry played a secondary role in the Parthian army, being used mainly to defend cities and fortifications. T was composed largely of local recruits, poorly equipped and trained. During battles, infantry was usually positioned to support the cavalry or to protect the flanks. Parthian military tactics reflected their ability to capitalize on the strengths of the cavalry and to adapt to various types of terrain and enemies. The Parthian army was built around the idea of mobility. Their cavalry could cover great distances in a short time, surprising the enemy and destabilizing their formations. The mounted archers used tactics of continuous harassment, attacking and retreating quickly to weaken the enemy before direct confrontation. After the mounted archers destabilized the enemy formations, the cataphracts launched decisive attacks. Their weight and strength were almost impossible to counter by the heavy infantry of the era. The Parthians were masters of using the terrain to their advantage. Often, they lured the enemy into open areas or strategic traps where their cavalry could operate at full capacity. The efficiency of the Parthian army was demonstrated in numerous confrontations, the most famous example being the Battle of Carrhae. The mobility of their cavalry and the use of innovative tactics allowed them to defeat larger and better equipped opponents, such as the Romans. However, the Parthian military also had its limitations. Although their cavalry was impressive, the Parthians had difficulty in prolonged battles or sieges of fortified cities. The lack of well-trained heavy infantry limited their ability to maintain control of conquered territories. The empire's feudal system meant that the army was made up of local contingents, which were not always effectively coordinated. This could lead to problems in the case of large-scale campaigns. Unlike the Romans, the Parthians did not excel in siege technology and tactics, which limited their ability to conquer and hold well-fortified cities. The military system of the Parthian Empire profoundly influenced the region and served as a model for empires that followed, including the Sassanid dynasty. The use of cataphracts and light cavalry became an essential component of warfare in the Near East and Central Asia. The Parthians demonstrated that a flexible army, well adapted to the terrain and with innovative tactics, could withstand and defeat even the greatest powers of the era, leaving behind a military legacy that inspired generations. Chapter 4: Culture and Religion. The culture and religion of the Parthian Empire reflected a remarkable diversity, formed by the combination of ancient Iranian traditions with Hellenistic influences brought by the conquests of Alexander the Great and his Seleucid successors. This cultural synthesis gave the Parthian Empire a unique identity, which was manifested in daily life, architecture, art, religious customs, and social relations. The Parthians had their roots in Iranian tribes that had migrated to the eastern region of Mesopotamia. This Iranian cultural substratum profoundly influenced the values and social structures of the empire. The dominant religion of the Parthians was Zoroastrianism, a faith based on the teachings of the prophet Zoroaster, Zarathustra. Preached the duality of good, Ahura Mazda, and evil, Engramenyu, emphasizing the importance of moral choices and the cosmic order, known as the Asavahista, the order that good. Fire temples, central symbols of Zoroastrianism, were spread throughout the empire, and priests, known as magi, played an essential role in rituals and in preserving traditions. The official language of the Parthians was Parthian, a variant of Middle Iranian.It was used in both administration and literature. Orally transmitted myths and legends later influenced Iranian epics, including the works of the Sassanid period and the Shahnameh, Book of Kings. The Parthians valued family loyalty, honor, and courage in battle. Iranian traditions were also reflected in their social Structure, which privileged military elites and local rulers, maintaining a well-defined feudal system. The conquests of Alexander the Great and the previous Seleucid domination left a deep mark on Parthian culture. Although the Parthians retained many of their Iranian traditions, they borrowed Hellenistic elements that enriched the cultural mosaic of the empire. Parthian architecture combined traditional Iranian styles with Greek influences, such as the use of columns and classical proportions. Palaces and temples were often decorated with frescoes and sculptures inspired by Hellenistic art. Statues of Greek gods were common in villages and cities where these influences were strongest, indicating extensive religious tolerance. Although Zoroastrianism was dominant, other cults and religions were tolerated. Greek gods such as Zeus, Hera, and Apollo were worshipped in certain regions, and their temples coexisted with Iranian sanctuaries. Religious syncretism allowed the formation of new interpretations and practices, in which local traditions mixed with Hellenistic ones. Parthian elites had adopted some Hellenistic traditions related to education and philosophy. For example, Greek texts on science, medicine, and ethics were studied in more cosmopolitan urban centers. One of the remarkable aspects of the Parthian Empire was its high degree of religious tolerance. The Parthians managed to govern a vast and diverse empire by accepting and integrating different religious beliefs. This pragmatic approach was essential for maintaining stability. The diverse ethnic and cultural groups in the empire were allowed to practice their own religions, including Mesopotamian cults, the worship of local Iranian gods, or Jewish traditions. This religious freedom contributed to the loyalty of the provinces to the central authority. The Zoroastrian priests, the Magi, were respected not only for their religious role, but also for their cultural and political influence. They were considered wise men and advisors to the rulers, contributing to the maintenance of social order. The connection between the Magi of the Parthian Empire and their traditions was later highlighted in Christian tradition, which mentions the 3 Magi from the east who came to visit him to pay homage to the infant Jesus. Parthian culture was reflected in daily life through customs, art, and social expressions. Festivals related to Zoroastrianism, such as Nowruz, Persian New Year, were important occasions for the communities. They celebrated the cycles of nature and the victories of light over darkness. The Parthians wore long, flowing robes, adapted to the climate of their region. Their clothing was influenced by both Iranian and Hellenistic traditions. Music and dance occupied an important place in Parthian culture, being practiced both at court and among the population. Traditional Iranian instruments were accompanied by Greek influences in musical styles. Games and competitions, including spear throwing and mock combat, were popular among the nobility. Parthian culture and religion profoundly influenced the empires that followed them, especially the Sassanid dynasty, which took over many of the traditions of the Parthian legacy is still visible today in Iranian traditions, and their cultural syncretism remains an example of harmony within ethnic and religious diversity. This unique fusion of Iranian and Hellenistic influences made of the Parthian Empire not only a military and political power, but also a vibrant center of culture and spirituality. Chapter 5. Trade Relations. The Parthian Empire played a crucial role in ancient international trade, serving as a vital intermediary between the Far East and the Mediterranean. Its strategic position, which controlled major trade routes, including the famous Silk Road, transformed the empire into a prosperous and influential economic center. This trade network not only brought wealth, but also allowed the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultures, solidifying the Parthian role as a bridge between civilizations. The Parthian Empire was located at the crossroads of major trade routes linking China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean world. This strategic positioning allowed it to control the transit of goods and become a key economic force. The most important trade route of the era, the Silk Road, crossed Parthian territory, connected China, which produced silk, with the markets of the Roman Empire, where this commodity was highly sought after. The Parthians not only facilitated transit, but imposed significant trade taxes, which generated substantial revenues for the imperial treasury. In addition to the Silk Road, the empire also controlled the overland trade routes linking Mesopotamia to India, as well as the ports of the Persian Gulf, where goods from South Asia were transported to the Near East. The diversity of goods that transited the Parthian Empire reflected the complexity and scale of trade during this era. Chinese silk was the most valuable commodity transported on the Silk Road. The lightness and durability of this material made it a symbol of luxury in the West. Other goods included spices, tea, ceramics, and jade products from China and India. The Roman Empire exported wine, glass, jewelry, precious metals, and manufactured goods such as weapons and tools. Perfume and aromatic oils were also popular in the eastern regions. The Parthians were also important producers of carpets, textiles, thoroughbred horses, agricultural products, and objects of art. Precious metal. These goods were highly valued in both the East and the West. Trade caravans were the backbone of trade in the Parthian Empire. They crossed vast expanses of deserts and mountains, transporting valuable goods through difficult regions. Caravans were composed of dozens or even hundreds of camels and donkeys, accompanied by merchants, guides, and armed guards. Trade routes were well marked, and caravans made regular stops at trading posts or oasis cities, where merchants refreshed their supplies. The Parthians invested in maintaining the security of the trade routes, ensuring protection of the caravans from bandits and hostile tribes. The trade routes were maintained, and the cities along them, such as Ctesiphon, Ecbatana, and Nisa, became thriving commercial centers. Trade was the economic engine of the Parthian Empire, contributing to the prosperity of the empire and the consolidation of its power. Taxes imposed on the transit of goods generated significant revenues for the state. Merchants paid taxes to cross Parthian territory, and these funds were used to maintain the army, infrastructure, and royal court. Cities along the trade routes developed rapidly, becoming important economic and cultural centers. Their markets hosted merchants from all corners of the known world, from Rome to China. Trade led to the emergence of a prosperous merchant class, which played an essential role in the Parthian economy and society. Trade was not limited to material goods, but was also a catalyst for cultural and intellectual exchange. Religions, philosophies, and ideologies circulated along the Silk Road. For example, Buddhist influences from India reached Central Asia and later China. At the same time, Greek and Roman ideas spread to the east, while Iranian traditions influenced the west. The languages used in trade languages, such as Parthian Greek and Aramaic, facilitated communication between merchants from different regions. This interaction led to an enrichment of vocabulary and the emergence of hybrid forms of expression. Control of the trade routes was a source of rivalry between the Parthians and other regional powers, especially the Roman Empire. The Romans repeatedly attempted to take control of the Parthian-controlled trade routes, which led to armed conflicts, such as the Parthian-Roman Wars. Despite these efforts, the Parthians managed to maintain their dominance over the trade of the Near East. The Parthians also had to compete with other trading entities, such as the kingdoms of Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent, for control of trade. The Parthian trade system profoundly influenced the Sassanid dynasty, which took control of the trade routes after the fall of the Parthians. The empire also helped create a global trade network that connected Europe, Asia, and Africa, setting a model for economic exchanges in later periods. Through their ability to control and capitalize on trade, the Parthians not only prospered economically, but also contributed to the cultural unification of the ancient world, demonstrating the importance of trade as a means of connecting civilizations. Chapter 6. The Magi Connection. In the history and culture of the Parthian Empire, the Magi occupy a central place, being both religious leaders and spiritual advisors to society. They were Zoroastrian priests renowned for their vast knowledge of astronomy, religion, and philosophy. Their role in the Parthian Empire went beyond the religious sphere, influencing politics and social life. The mention of 3 Magi in the Gospel of Matthew as visitors to the infant Jesus emphasizes their importance and connects Parthian traditions to the story of early Christianity. The Magi have their origins in Zoroastrian traditions, being originally priests dedicated to the cult of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism. The Magi were responsible for maintaining the sacred fire in the temples, a symbol of purity and divine light in the Zoroastrian religion. They were considered intermediaries between people and Ahura Mazda, having important roles in religious rituals and in the interpretation of sacred texts, such as the Avesta. In addition to their religious duties, the Magi were scholars with vast knowledge in fields such as astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. The study of the movements of the stars was considered essential for understanding the cosmic order and divine will. Astronomy and astrology, although distinct, were closely related. The Magi interpreted celestial signs to predict major events or to guide royal decisions. Within the Parthian court, the Magi played an essential role in advising the king. They offered advice based on religious and cosmological interpretations, thus influencing politics and military strategy. The Magi formed a well-defined class in Parthian society, having a privileged status. The Magi were chosen from young men with special abilities, who underwent a rigorous process of training in religion, science, and philosophy. Their education included the study of Zoroastrian traditions, ancient languages, and advanced techniques of astronomical observation. For the common people, the Magi were keepers of order's sacred and divine wisdom. They officiated religious ceremonies, interpreted dreams, and provided guidance in difficult times. The Magi were responsible for administering the fire temples, which were religious, cultural, and educational centers. These temples symbolized the unity of faith and were spread throughout the empire. One of the most famous episodes related to the Magi is the one mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew and the biblical account. 3 Magi from the east traveled to pay homage to the baby Jesus. According to tradition, the Magi were guided by a bright star, known in Christianity as the Star of Bethlehem. Their experience in astronomy allowed them to interpret the appearance of this phenomenon as a divine sign. The star indicated the place of birth of Jesus, whom they identified as the King of the Jews. The Magi offered the baby 3 gifts: gold, symbolizing royalty; frankincense, a symbol of divinity; and myrrh, foreshadowing his sacrifice. These gifts had a deep spiritual significance, reflecting both the identity of Jesus and his messianic role. The presence of the Magi in the biblical account emphasizes the cultural and religious connection between the Middle East and the events in Judea. The Parthian Magi may have been influenced by the Zoroastrian tradition of recognizing spiritual leaders by heavenly signs. Zoroastrianism and Christianity share several common concepts that may have contributed to the Magi's interest in the birth of Jesus. Both religions emphasize the conflict between the forces of good and evil and the importance of moral choices. In Zoroastrianism, the concept of the Saoshyant, a savior who will bring order and peace at the end of time, is similar to that of the Messiah in the Jewish and Christian traditions. The influence of the Magi was not limited to the Parthian era. After the fall of the empire, their traditions continued to influence. Under the Sassanids, the priestly class of Magi became even more powerful. Consolidating Zoroastrianism as the state religion in medieval Europe, the Magi were revered as mystical figures and symbols of Eastern wisdom. The legend of the 3 Magi was amplified in later Christian traditions, being illustrated in art and literature. The Magi were more than religious leaders of the Parthian Empire. They symbolized the connection between knowledge, spirituality, and political power. Their appearance in the Gospel of Matthew emphasizes the global significance of the Parthian tradition and their role as intermediaries between cultures and religions. Through their influence, the Magi demonstrated how spirituality and wisdom could transcend borders, uniting diverse civilizations in a common vision of divinity and humanity. Chapter 7. Diplomatic Relations. The Parthian Empire, strategically located at the crossroads of East and West, excelled in the art of diplomacy, skillfully navigating complex relations with great powers of the time, such as Rome and China. This diplomatic capacity allowed them to maintain their political and economic influence, making them a central player on the international stage of antiquity. Relations between the Parthian Empire and Rome were often marked by military conflicts, but also by periods of negotiation and cooperation. Although natural rivals, the Parthians and Romans concluded peace treaties to establish borders and avoid costly conflicts. A notable example is the Treaty of 20 BC, concluded between the Roman Emperor Augustus and the Parthian king Phraates IV, by which the Romans recovered the banners lost at the Battle of Carrhae, and the Parthians obtained recognition of their autonomy over the eastern regions. The Parthians frequently sent embassies to Rome to negotiate peace terms or to discuss alliances against other common rivals. The Parthian diplomat was often chosen from among the nobles or trusted advisors, reflecting the seriousness of relations with Rome. Although political rivalry was evident, trade flourished between the two empires. Silk, spices, and other exotic products from Asia were transported through Parthian territory to Roman markets, generating significant profits. Lesser known but equally important aspect of Parthian foreign policy was diplomacy with the Han dynasty of China. The Parthians, known in Chinese sources as Anshi, were seen as a strategic ally against nomadic tribes and a vital trading partner. The Chinese were interested in Western goods arriving on the Silk Road, and the Parthians controlled access to them. The first Chinese embassy to the Parthian Empire was sent by Zhang Qian in the 2nd century BC, under Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty. Zhang Qian described the Parthians as a prosperous people with large and wealthy cities. The Parthians responded with their own delegations, establishing diplomatic relations that facilitated trade and cultural exchange. The Parthians functioned as intermediaries between China and the Roman Empire, controlling the flow of goods and information. This position gave them significant economic and diplomatic advantage. In addition to relations with the great empires, the Parthians cultivated ties with various states and tribes of Central Asia and the Middle East. To protect their eastern borders, the Parthians formed alliances with nomadic tribes of the Central Asian steppes. These alliances were often cemented by royal marriages or offers of mutual protection. In the early stages of their existence, the Parthians maintained complex relations with the Hellenistic kingdoms that remained after the fall of the Seleucid Empire, sometimes cooperating, sometimes conflicting for influence in the region. The southeastern borders of the Parthian Empire allowed contact with the kingdoms of northern India, leading to trade and cultural exchanges. Indian religions and art had a significant influence on Parthian culture. The Parthian success in maintaining complex diplomatic relations was the result of well-defined strategies. In times of conflict between other great powers, the Parthians often adopted a position of active neutrality, offering themselves as mediators or benefiting economically from the rivalries of others. Parthian diplomats were renowned for their ability to adapt to diverse cultures and political systems, which allowed them to successfully negotiate complex treaties. The Parthians did not hesitate to use military force when their interests were threatened, but they preferred diplomatic solutions to avoid long and costly wars. Negotiations and peace treaties helped maintain stable borders, allowing the empire to focus on internal consolidation. International trade facilitated by diplomatic relations brought considerable wealth and solidified the Parthians' role as intermediaries between civilizations. Through their interactions with other cultures, the Parthians enriched their own civilization, adopting and adapting foreign elements, such as Hellenistic art and Indian traditions. The Parthian diplomatic relations had a lasting impact on the region. The Sassanid dynasty, the Parthian successor, adopted many of their diplomatic strategies and continued to successfully navigate relations with Rome and other powers. Through their diplomacy, the Parthians helped create a global network of contacts which favored economic, cultural, and intellectual exchanges. The Parthians' role as mediators between great powers demonstrated the importance of diplomacy in maintaining peace and prosperity in complex and interconnected regions. Thus, the Parthian Empire remains a shining example of diplomatic skill, demonstrating how an empire could use strategy and negotiation to maintain its power and influence in a world dominated by conflict and rivalry. Chapter 8. Capital Cities. The Parthian Empire, vast and diverse, had several important cities that served as administrative, commercial, and cultural centers. These, Ctesiphon, located on the banks of the Tigris River, became the main capital and symbol of Parthian power. Capital cities not only reflected the political ambitions of the Parthians, but were also essential points for trade, culture, and religion. Ctesiphon was founded by the Parthians in the 2nd century BC, on the banks of the Tigris River, southeast of Babylon. Its strategic location facilitated control over the region. Positioned at the crossroads of East and West, Ctesiphon became a key point on the Silk Road, connecting the Parthian Empire with the Roman world and the Far East. Ctesiphon was renowned for the grandeur of its architecture, especially the Arch of Ctesiphon, Tak Kasra. An impressive example of engineering and designed IT is one of the largest brick arches ever built and symbolized the power and grandeur of the Parthian kingdom. The city had royal palaces, temples, and gardens, all reflecting influences from the Iranian and Hellenistic. Ctesiphon was a vibrant commercial hub, where merchants from the Roman Empire, India, China, and Arabia met. Goods such as silk, spices, precious metals, and luxury items passed through the city's markets. The city was also a cultural center, hosting Zoroastrian temples and promoting the arts and literature. In addition to Ctesiphon, other cities played an important role in the administration and culture of the Parthian Empire. Ctesiphon, the glorious heart of the Parthian Empire. Ctesiphon, one of the greatest capitals of the ancient world, was the political, military, and cultural center of the Parthian Empire. Located on the banks of the Tigris River, near modern-day Baghdad, Ctesiphon became a symbol of Parthian power and influence in the region. Due to its strategic position, the city played a crucial role in controlling trade routes and defending the empire against its enemies, especially the Romans. The city was founded by the Parthians in the 2nd century BC as a counterweight to the Greco-Roman influence in the region and quickly became a center of imperial administration. Ctesiphon experienced impressive development, being expanded and enriched over the centuries. Its magnificent architecture reflected Persian and Mesopotamian cultural influences, and its sumptuous palaces were renowned for their beauty and grandeur. The city's most emblematic building was the Tak Kasra, a colossal audience hall with a huge vault, which remains today an impressive example of ancient engineering and architecture. This building symbolized the authority and splendor of the Parthian kings, being used for imperial ceremonies and receptions. In addition, Ctesiphon was surrounded by strong walls and had an advanced infrastructure, including aqueducts and lively markets where trade between merchants from all over the known world took place. Ctesiphon was not only an administrative center, but also a key point of the Silk Road trade route, connecting the East and the West. Merchants brought valuable goods here, such as silks from China, spices from India, and handicrafts from the Roman Empire. This continuous flow of wealth and ideas transformed the city into a convergence point of civilizations, where Eastern and Western traditions met and blended harmoniously. Despite its greatness, Ctesiphon was subjected to numerous attacks and conquests over time. The Romans, in particular, repeatedly attempted to capture the city, and sometimes succeeded in temporarily occupying it. However, Ctesiphon remained a bastion of Parthian power until the fall of the empire and the rise of the Sassanids, who transformed it into the center of their own dynasty. Today, the ruins of Ctesiphon stand as a testament to its former greatness and influence. Archaeologists and historians continue to study this legendary city, uncovering new details about Parthian life and culture. Its legacy lives on in Middle Eastern history, reminding us of an empire that defied the great powers of the time and left an indelible mark on the ancient world. Hecatompylos, the legendary city. Located in modern-day Iran, the legendary city of the Parthian Empire was one of the most important capitals of this vast kingdom, serving as a political, economic, and cultural center. Strategically located at the crossroads of trade routes linking the Middle East to Central Asia, Hecatompylos was a vital node in the Silk Road network, facilitating trade between East and West. Since the Hellenistic period, the city has been known for its splendor and strategic position. Although the exact origins of the settlement are unclear, it is known to have been an important center since the Achaemenid period, then becoming a metropolis during the Seleucid period and, later, a key capital of the Parthian Empire. The architecture of Hecatompylos reflects the diverse cultural influences that intersected in the city. Its imposing walls, temples, and crowded squares were testaments to the wealth and power of the Parthians. The royal palaces, built of brick and covered with sumptuous decorations, demonstrated the mastery of local craftsmen. In addition, the city was dotted with lush gardens and complex irrigation systems that ensured a constant supply of water, an essential element for its prosperity. The economic role of Hecatompylos was particularly important. Located on one of the most active trade routes of the ancient world, the city was a meeting point for merchants from the Roman Empire, India, and China. Luxury products such as silks, spices, precious metals, and rare stones were traded here, which contributed to its development and the accumulation of impressive wealth. Hecatompylos was also an important military center. Due to its strategic position, the city served as a defensive bastion against external invasions, often being a garrison for the elite troops of the Parthian Empire. Its imposing fortifications and its position in the middle of difficult terrain made it a crucial point of resistance against Roman expansion. Despite its importance, Hecatompylos began to lose its influence with the decline of the Parthian Empire. As the Sassanids took control of the region, the city was gradually abandoned, and its glory faded into the mists of time. Today, its ruins remain a silent testimony to a golden age, evoking the image of a city that was once the center of a great civilization. Hecatompylos is not just a place forgotten by history, but part of the cultural heritage of humanity. Its story continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists, who seek to reveal the secrets of this legendary city, once the jewel of the Parthian Empire. Seleucia on the Tigris, the pearl of the Parthian Empire. Seleucia on the Tigris was one of the most important cities of the Parthian Empire, serving as a leading political, economic, and cultural center. Founded by Seleucus I Nicator in the 4th century BC, the city was a prosperous metropolis, strategically located on the banks of the Tigris River, which gave it access to vital trade routes in Mesopotamia. Seleucia on the Tigris was a cosmopolitan city, with a heterogeneous population of Greeks, Mesopotamians, Persians, and other ethnic groups who lived together in a vibrant atmosphere. Its architecture reflected this diversity, combining Hellenistic elements with Oriental influences. The city was dotted with temples, bustling markets, and imposing administrative buildings, demonstrating its importance in the ancient world. As a crucial trading hub, Seleucia on the Tigris facilitated trade between the Roman Empire, India, and China. Goods such as silks, spices, precious metals, and fine ceramics passed through the city's ports and markets, contributing to its impressive wealth. Due to its strategic position, the city was often a point of contention between rival empires, and control of Seleucia on the Tigris was considered a sign of supreme power. Culturally, the city was a center of learning and the arts. Seleucia's libraries and academies housed philosophical, scientific, and literary texts, and the city was renowned for promoting knowledge and intellectual exchange. Its temples and sanctuaries were also places of pilgrimage for various religions, illustrating the religious tolerance of the era. Militarily, Seleucia on the Tigris was a bastion strategic location of the Parthian Empire. Its fortified garrisons and walls provided protection against invasions and internal conflicts. However, despite its defensive measures, the city was subjected to numerous sieges and destruction throughout its tumultuous history. With the rise of the Sassanids, The influence of Seleucia on the Tigris began to decline. The city was eventually eclipsed by Ctesiphon, the new capital of the Sassanids, and was gradually abandoned. Today, its ruins serve as testimony to an era of glory and a city that was once the pearl of Mesopotamia. Seleucia on the Tigris is not just a forgotten chapter of history, but a symbol of the interaction of cultures, of innovation, and of human ambition. Its legacy continues to fascinate archaeologists and historians, who are gradually uncovering the secrets of this legendary city, once a metropolis of the ancient world. Ecbatana, the jewel of the Parthian Empire. Ecbatana, one of the oldest and most important metropolises of the ancient world, was a key political and cultural center of the Parthian Empire. Located in the mountainous regions of present-day Iran, the city served as the summer capital of the Parthian kings due to its cool climate and strategic position. Founded by the Medes and later transformed by the Achaemenids, Ecbatana became an opulent city, renowned for its grandiose palaces and advanced infrastructure. Under Parthian rule, the city continued to prosper, becoming an important commercial and administrative hub. Its impressive buildings, with high walls and gold-plated roofs, reflected the wealth and power of its rulers. Ecbatana was recognized for its cultural and artistic influence. Here, artisans and architects created spectacular works, and the city hosted academies and temples dedicated to the various religions of the era. Ethnic and religious diversity was a defining characteristic, and Ecbatana functioned as a meeting point for Hellenistic, Persian, and Mesopotamian civilizations. Economically, the city was at the crossroads of trade routes linking the Middle East to Central Asia. Caravans traveling the Silk Road stopped in Ecbatana, where merchants exchanged goods such as textiles, spices, precious metals, and handicrafts. This intense economic activity contributed to the consolidation of the city as one of the most prosperous centers of the Parthian Empire. The strategic importance of Ecbatana was also considerable. Located in a mountainous region that was difficult to access, the city offered a defensive advantage against invasions. Throughout history, Ecbatana was a bastion of resistance against various external threats, including Roman campaigns. With the decline of the Parthian Empire and the rise of the Sassanids, Ecbatana lost its political importance, but it remained a symbol of its past greatness. Today, its ruins continue to fascinate historians and archaeologists, who are gradually discovering the secrets of this legendary city. Ecbatana is not just a forgotten city of history, but a testimony to an era of glory and cultural diversity. Its remains are reminiscent of a sophisticated civilization, capable of combining ancient traditions with the innovations of its time. Thus, the legacy of Ecbatana continues to live on, inspiring future generations to explore the past and understand the complexity of the ancient world. Nice. The first capital of the Parthian Empire. Nice, located in the northeast of the Parthian Empire, in present-day Turkmenistan, is considered one of the first capitals of this powerful empire. Founded in the 3rd century BC by Arsaces I, the founder of the Arsacid dynasty, Nice was a political, religious, and administrative center of great importance, playing a key role in consolidating Parthian power in the region. The city was known not only as a royal residence, but also as a place of worship and a royal necropolis, where the first Parthian rulers were buried. The royal tombs of Nisa demonstrate the complexity of the Parthian funerary rituals and the deep respect for their rulers. The city was also a sacred place, with temples and sanctuaries dedicated to Iranian gods, being a point of reference for the spirituality and cultural identity of the Parthian Empire. Architecturally, Nisa impresses with its sophisticated structures, which combine Hellenistic and Iranian influences. Archaeological excavations have revealed imposing palaces, huge warehouses for provisions and wine, as well as richly decorated audience halls. The buildings were built of mud brick, and some of them were covered with frescoes and ornaments of remarkable artistic finesse. Among the most valuable discoveries are sculptures, inscriptions, and luxury objects, such as carved ivories and vessels made of precious metals, which reflect the prosperity and cultural refinement of the city. The economic role of Nisa was considerable, due to its strategic position on the trade routes that linked Central Asia to the Middle East. Merchants came here to exchange goods, and the city became a meeting point for traders from the Roman Empire, China, and India. Fine textiles, exotic spices, precious metals, and ceramics were traded, thus contributing to its economic development and the accumulation of impressive wealth. Although Nisa gradually lost its influence in favor of other cities, such as Ctesiphon, its historical importance was not forgotten. The city was abandoned in the last, but its ruins continue to be a subject of study for archaeologists and historians, providing valuable information about the culture and civilization of the Parthians. The capital cities of the Parthian Empire had not only a symbolic, but also a functional role. The cities hosted the royal courts, administrative offices, and religious temples. Local satraps reported to the courts in the capitals, and important decisions were made in these centers. Being located at the intersection of trade routes, the capital cities ensured the constant flow of goods and taxes. The markets of these cities were full of goods from all corners of the known world, contributing to the wealth of the empire. The cities were hotbeds of cultural exchange, where local traditions merged with Hellenistic and Oriental influences. The temples and schools in the capitals were places of learning and religious worship, promoting the cultural identity of the empire. Parthian architecture, visible in the capital cities, reflected a unique combination of Hellenistic influences and Iranian traditions. The palaces of Ctesiphon and Ecbatana were designed to symbolize the power of the monarchy, with vast halls and elaborate decorations. The sacred fire was kept in imposing temples, and their design reflected a deep respect for Zoroastrianism. The cities had complex urban structures, with central squares, paved roads, and advanced sewage systems. The capital cities of the Parthian Empire had a lasting impact. After the fall of the Parthians, Ctesiphon became the capital of the Sassanid dynasty, retaining its importance until the Islamic period. Parthian architecture and urban planning influenced the design of early Islamic cities, especially in Mesopotamia. The ruins of the capital cities provide valuable information about the economic, political, and cultural life of the Parthians. The capital cities of the Parthian Empire, especially Ctesiphon, remain testimonies to the grandeur and influence of the civilization, emphasizing their essential role in connecting the Eastern and Western worlds.